today we have a great panel who've, and the good part about the panel is that we have people who are going to enter into the Indian market, so they have a perspective on franchising. And then we also have seasoned franchisors, both Indian as well as Nissan from Crocs, who've kind of, seen other markets franchising, done franchising in other markets, and now they have experienced Indian market too. So it would be a diverse panel giving us some great views on where they see on the ground franchising happening and what do we see about franchising and where it is likely to go in probably the next year as well as in years to come. So welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you here on this Monday morning, all bright, and I think the whole industry is present over here just to see where in franchise industry or how they should actually be taking or what the drive, how they should be driving their brands in this franchise industry, which is ever changing in India, I would say, at this current stage. So I'll start with you, Jason. I think Green Beans Coffee is coming to India. So, so how have you really visualized India as a market? What have you, what is it in terms of your research that you have done which tells you that India is a great market? You're already present in 70 countries. And, and come to think of it, food is becoming a rage in India. So a food franchise is one of the most sought after franchise in the Indian marketplace today. So one, I would like to know what is or how have you researched Indian market as a franchise marketplace? And secondly, I would like to know, how do you peg yourselves against a lot, because we have lots of coffee companies who've stepped in India in the last 1 year, of course the most significant one being Starbucks. So how are you different from Starbucks? What is your proposition which makes it a little different from other cafe companies who've stepped in the country?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here amongst you. We've been studying the Indian market for a number of years now. We actually employ quite a large number of from India, population from India, and I've been coming to the country for the past 12, 15 years, and I've been studying and evaluating the growth, the emerging middle class, the disposable income, the openness to Western products and services, and for us, it's been a matter of timing as far as when we can get in. We feel like this is the right time. The people are ready for it. There's very much an entrepreneurial spirit in India that I appreciate. I'm very much an entrepreneur. We're an entrepreneurial company, so we look for people that are passionate and energetic and want to succeed. And there's definitely, you feel that vibe. Yesterday, you walk around, you feel it, you see it. So from a number of aspects, this is the right place for us to be. How do we compare to our competitors? Well, if you look around look at the gym space, look at the food space, look at the healthcare, education space here, there are a number of players. And as an entrepreneur, you try to figure out a way to differentiate yourself from your competitors and create your own space in the market. We see there are the local players here, CCD, who's been here for a number of years, Barista, and of course Starbucks, who came in the market a few years ago. And we clearly see ourselves, and I've put this statement before in our discussions, we try to differentiate ourselves by being not a Me Too coffee company. We don't want to be like everybody else. So we have devised systems and ways to differentiate ourselves from our competitors so that we can attract the customer, give them a value proposition, and give them a reason to come back repeatedly. We serve our customers with great respect, and we have a lot of respect for our customers, and we want to earn that business from them. So it's taken us a long time to perfect this, and that's why we've been waiting to get in at the right time. Entrepreneurs that get into this business, they put their life savings into getting into franchise, and it's important that when we engage with them, that they succeed. We want them to succeed. We don't want to just take their money and say, okay, thank you very much. The biggest nightmare in franchising, is, as you all know, you probably heard, is training, hand-holding. They take your money and then they disappear. So we've put a great package together. We think this is the right time for us to get into the market, and it's a huge market, and there's a lot of opportunities for us.
Sure. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Jason. I'll at this point also like to engage Jimmy. So Jimmy has a food concept which is more specialized. Jimmy, how do you rate the Indian market? So my question also, the one that I asked to Jason, how do you rate India as a franchise marketplace? Is it working?
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you all. Maria, how do you, Ritu, Ritu, thank you for inviting me. We decided to come into the Indian market because we realized that the Indian market is very similar to the South African market. The problems that we experience in the franchising industry worldwide are very similar, but between India and South Africa, we have a lot of very similar problems. The main problems being that we are dealing with a fairly uneducated working class, so we need to ensure that the training and the systems that we use are sufficiently strong enough to make sure that people are capable of giving the product that the customer requires. The Indian market also is going through a lot of change, and one of the things we've learnt over the years is that change is the biggest contributor to franchises and businesses failing. So you need to be on top of the market, and you need to be able to adapt your product and your service to the needs of the market at the time. We have found that if we ran our business the same as we did 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in business today. It's extremely important that we understand that there are constant changes in the market and we have to be ahead of it, and also that change is the only thing that we can be certain is going to happen, and we need to drive that change through innovation. It is important that if you go into a market, that you don't try and compete with everybody else on an equal footing. You need to have a different product, a better service. You need to have a differentiator which is substantially strong enough in order to make you have any form of impact on the market. So we originally went into the restaurant business. We took a product which most people couldn't afford to eat, and we brought it down to a price level that they could afford, which was prawns, and we became extremely successful with it. In fact, at one stage we were one of 6 groups in the world that actually specialized in prawns, and the fact that we did that and we did it well, we were very successful. And through all our businesses, we've tried to bring that difference into the operations of the business, but at the same time taking cognizance that we need to train our staff 100% so that they can deliver the product correctly. We also need to make sure that the systems are in place so it's an easy business to run. And one of the things that Gaurav said earlier was very significant, that the enthusiast level, the new person who's going into business who's had no experience whatsoever, that person is going to be the driving force of the business, and he needs to be trained sufficiently and strongly enough in order to make the business successful. And his success ultimately is our success. So it's really critically important. So the core to the sustainability of the business and the success of the business in the long term is making sure that the business obviously is a profitable business, it's got a profitable business model, but that the staff and the management and owners of the business are sufficiently well trained in order to make the business run effectively and profitably. And then we give the guidance in innovation, in change, and so on.
Sure.
We have developed a new pizza concept, which takes cognizance of the fact that we have all these issues in the industry. So we can run our concept with 3 people. We can generate a pizza, bake the pizza in 59 seconds, and it is only requires a very small space. So all of the factors that are negative in the industry, we've looked at them and we've created the best possible working model to work around it in order to go forward.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for sharing your insights. So he's right when he says that it's important when the market gets crowded and there are a lot of concepts which tend to look similar. Differentiation is really the key factor which will help you drive your franchise system into the country, as you very well put about how you're going to differentiate your coffee concept against other. So I'll now come down while Jason and Jimmy are going to more enter and going to experience the Indian franchise marketplace. We also have 3 panelists here with us who've kind of been there and done that in the Indian franchise market. So I'll start with you, Murli. You know, Sagar Ratna, as Gaurav said, which was Sagar earlier, and started its franchise journey pretty much, you know, when we started our franchise journey at Franchise India. So it's come a long way. And it's a wave that we have noticed, and particularly as an editor, it is something that I have been seeing that but in the US, a lot of franchise and mature franchise concepts are being taken by private equity groups who not just put money or infuse funding into it, but also operate those groups and work very closely with the franchisees. Now, it's, you know, in India, while it's still relatively new, while you have done it with Sagar Ratna, there is Everstone Capital, which has multiple concepts like Burger King and some others which they are operating. So how do you see the play of private equity increasing in franchising in India in the coming times? Do you think it's also going to happen in concepts other than food? It's already happened in education. So a lot of education companies also got funding, franchise companies that is. And secondly, how is a private equity group as an operator or as a franchisor different from a pure play franchisor? So, you know, where do you think you're not as flexible as a regular franchisor would be, and where you bring better practices than a franchise entrepreneur would?
Thanks for the question, Ritu. I guess before I start off on the question, there is one business that Gaurav was mentioning where still gray hair and no hair is at least respected, is probably the business of franchising. I guess otherwise, like when we have seen 20, 25 somethings coming over and taking over various businesses and disrupting the market, this is one business where really experience is required. And yeah, that is where, like, I would say the market is maturing and we are learning fast. Now, coming to the question on private equity, I guess there is a life cycle stage for every business. And this is one business where I see private equity guys figuring out ways of putting money into one concept and saying, like, I mean, I will own a particular market share. And this is one area, I mean, one of the ways of looking for the private equity is this one, where they want to put in money and take over some market share in some geographies and quickly make an entry into those markets. That is one. I would say the other areas would be primarily businesses where they want to keep some control for the money that they put in. And it is important, and in the franchise space, what we have seen is at least there is a level of control that they bring in. They bring in a lot of international expertise, and the private equity guys actually are very keen to know basically whether they will get a return in the quickest possible way. But apart from that, their interest will be more in terms of the stability that the business will bring in, the expertise that that brand will bring in. And those are things that the private equity guys look for. And therefore, like, you see businesses like Burger King, if they had to get into a geography of India, it was very easy for a bigger entrepreneur to take over in India. But it was easy for them to just tie up with one private equity guy and say, like, this is the investment we require in this market. And over a period of time, if Burger King wanted to actually step over and say, like, we would like to take over the business, it was easier for them to negotiate in and go in. So private equity will be one of those transition partners, the way I look at it. It won't be a partnership that will stay for, from a permanency perspective. It won't be a perspective where, like, they will come in and say, like, I will take in the market for about 50 odd years and grow this and make it happen. It's going to be a transition phase. There will be smaller private equity guys who will come in initially to take over a business from X to Y. And from the Y point, you will need a journey that will be covered by somebody else. And that journey will happen with some other partner. And this is the transition that I see from a private equity perspective. But the interest in terms of saying, like, returns on the business, that will be very high. They will never, it is not going to be, if it was an individual, probably there would be some level of flexibility in terms of the requirements on the returns on the business. But from a private equity perspective, it is sometimes very difficult to say no and say, like, no, we will have to do this and make this return happen. So it's a journey that will have to be covered, I would say.
So I think it works, it's like a two-sided sword. It works both ways. It's like, so some things private equity brings and they put the foot down and say, no, we're just going to do things this way, because which franchise are usually good, flexible about, and would not really help the system at large in the long run. But then at the same time, markets tend to change, and sometimes the inflexibility or the rigidity of a private equity operator could also be, I would not say detrimental to the system, but could probably make the system, put the system into a conflict. So, and it's something that has happened over a time in markets like the US also. We'll see something very similar happening in India, and more so in the coming years. So thanks for sharing that, Murli. I'll now come to Nissan. Nissan, most of fashion, you represent Crocs, and it was a complete differentiator when it came to footwear. We understood footwear, which was probably more ethnic footwear, or we understood more, sports footwear. So it was a differentiator footwear that came in. And, but suddenly, and as far as I was concerned, writing Retailer magazine, I could say this was one of the best concepts which had come in footwear. And I could see almost 1,000 stores being set up in India, or shop-in-shops being set up in India for it. And then suddenly the whole ecosystem changed. E-commerce started taking over, virtually to the point where people have started buying the footwear. A very unlikely category 5 years back became one of the best categories online. So how do you think the online model has really affected, one, fashion retail? And secondly, so it's a slightly tricky model when you also have franchisees in there with you, because, the franchisee would typically look at it as the principal taking away his revenue. So how would you address the franchisee in e-commerce space?
E-com is the hot topic everywhere we go these days, and from two perspectives: and how disruptive is it to retail in India, and also how do you get the omni-channel customers, first off. So let's talk about how it's disruptive to retail and why it's unique compared to any other e-commerce launches around the globe. Typically, e-commerce has been an oligopolistic play where you've had a couple of big players. In India, unfortunately, we've had first 2, then 3, then 4, then 5 big players keep coming up, right? So it's very hard to find the bottom of the well when you're playing the last man standing game. The other point is, we as a generation in India have become so mobile enabled, and we are become rapidly part of what I call the generation of screenagers. We go from screen to screen to screen. We no longer are millennials. We no longer are Gen X or Gen Y. We're all screenagers. We live off screens, and we're very connected. And so the e-commerce tsunami, as I call it, has really affected every one of us. And whether you're in goods, whether you're selling goods through a franchisee or a store, or you're selling services, whether you're in the dental services industry or childcare or child fund industry, at some point e-commerce is going to be disrupted. And it's disrupted from the standpoint that it redefines what MSRP stands for. We all understood it stood for maximum selling retail price, and e-commerce has said that's minimum selling retail price, right? And they've proven that over and over again. What's important to keep clear through the entire debate and the rhetoric of e-commerce and how disruptive it is you got to put on the customer's lens, right? You got to look at your brand, your franchise operations through the eyes of the customer, because ultimately that's who you're trying to serve. So franchisees and franchisors that embrace having a omni-channel experience where they can leverage the position of the franchisee being located locally. People still want to have the assurance that if this doesn't work for me, this product's not right, I can go to a store and get it ameliorated. I can get it fixed by going to and visiting a store. And that's very important for a brand to have that facility. So it's about incorporating it into the fabric of how you set up your franchise operations and how you let your franchisees leverage off the e-com play. It's also about making sure there is no channel conflict, making sure that you have products that if they're going to be discounted on a minimum sales price, have a different channel altogether. And that, that brings to the future of franchising. We're going to be very successful as a country continuing to franchise and grow the franchise model. Of course, regulation is on our side. We have FDI today, and I don't see it going away anytime in the near future, which in India makes franchising even that much more of a necessity. Regulations, as we all know, are necessary evils, and somebody once said, when it's no longer necessary, it's just evil. But that's a different meeting altogether. So to the foreseeable future, the regulations are going to support a franchise economy. So I don't see this being overly disruptive. I don't think you can put your head in the sand and say it doesn't affect you. Whether you're selling, like I said, even services, Groupon has changed how people market services. So whether you're selling a barbecue or you're selling a cup of coffee experience, Groupon gives you that minimum selling price at a different scale than any time else we've had. So it's here, it's going to stay, it's not going away, and the faster franchisors and franchisees weave it into the fabric of how they operate, the better off we all will be.
Certainly. But where do you see in a system, how do the franchisor and franchisee find the fit between e-commerce? How can the franchisee not feel threatened with e-commerce coming into a franchise system?
Yeah, so the good news is we are not a well-developed retail society yet, right? So we have we're so underpenetrated relative to what the Indian market has to offer. That I think it frustrates a lot of international franchisors when they do come to India. They say, listen, 1.3 billion people times 0.X%, and we should be at Y revenues or Y doors. And it doesn't work that way because we're so underpenetrated. What are the numbers? 15 to 17% is organized retail today. So in a developed retail economy, this would be very disruptive, absolutely, because the pie is already being carved out. But in a growing economy where retail, there are more malls coming up, there's urbanization coming up, people are having better aspirations, better income, better awareness, it's only a positive thing that can happen. So we're aided by the tide that's happening in India, to be honest with you, aided and protected. Otherwise, it would be rather detrimental. But we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that there is a tide in the favor of organized brick-and-mortar retail that great franchisees, great franchisors can leverage running good operations and having great relationships.
Well, in some ways, that's great that we are still an emerging retail country, because that gives us room to play and experiment far more with e-commerce and probably any other sort of mobile channel which will actually come in the coming times to sell our products. So thanks, Nissan, for that. I'll come to you, Adarsh. If I understand, wellness is one of the best categories. In fact, fitness is one of the best categories and one of the places where there's most action as far as franchising is concerned. Now, understandably, getting a 55-year-old customer or a 60-year-old person into a gym is difficult. So getting a 25-year-old to think gym and think fitness is easier. Do you think it's the same for the franchisees also? So my question is that, are you targeting young people to come or become your franchisees, because they're also the right customers?
Thank you for having me here. I'll answer your question in two parts. there's a business for everybody. When you say 55, 60, it makes everybody feel a little old. It's not so. Shah Rukh Khan is almost at that age. So is Ajay Devgan. And these guys have now got six packs. Except Salman Khan, all of these people are discovering six packs now. India is becoming younger. We are more aspirational. We want to be fitter, younger, better. It could be vanity. It's a lifestyle choice. We all want to be better. So is a business. Whether you're a 25-year-old, a disruptive startup, or you're a retired guy who has money, or you've saved something, you want to do business, wellness and fitness is something which is something which you can succeed. Anybody can succeed. It's good business, it makes good money. You don't need to be in Delhi. You don't need to be in Connaught Place to make 1 crore or 2 crore rupee turnover. You could be in Noida, you could be in Meerut, you could be in Ghaziabad, you could be in Sikandrabad, you could be in Bilaspur, you could be in a city like Ichhal Karanji, which is near Pune. I am guessing most of you have not heard of Ichhal Karanji, where our store makes 1 crore rupee of revenue. So there is aspiration in this country. We see growth more in tier 2, tier 3 cities. There's a huge potential. So when an investor comes to us who's looking at an investment which could be between 1 and 2 crores or 2.5 crores, we don't see just a fact whether he has money or not, or how old or how young he is. Whether he has a passion to drive the business. We don't guarantee business success. Any business can fail. Your business can fail, my business can fail. Fitness businesses also fail. So there is no guarantee to success. If you are willing to invest your time and run it yourself with passion or oversee it yourself, it will succeed. So we have people, I recently signed a franchisee who is about 30 years old. He's opened a first store with us in Vapi. It's a city near Pune. Near Bombay. And he's a chartered accountant. He's a fitness guy. And last week I signed up somebody who's retired and who's got money, and he's about 65-year-old. He believes his son will eventually join him. So fitness is for everybody. All you need is passion, and you really need to be involved. You don't need to be in a large city. You don't need to be in high street in every place. So you could create a model which will work for a small town and still make a 35% or 37% EBITDA, which is not bad.
No, that's pretty interesting that, that fitness today as an industry is emerging the way it is. I mean, the amount that we like our bhaturas and chana bhaturas and, samosas, to think that, we'll equally think about going to a gym and thinking six-pack, as you said, looked like a far-off thought maybe 4 years back, but today is happening. So it's a country which is changing really fast, and we need to change with it. We need our business models. So one of the first thing when we were putting this show together was that we understood that businesses have to have a customer who is 25-year-old. So it's not as if we're not addressing the people who are elder, but the point is that because we have such a young population in this country, that businesses need to address, or if they're not addressing, they need to find a way to address a 25 to 30-year-old or maybe even younger 18-year, 19-year-old customer to be able to sustain itself, which has been the larger agenda of this Power Breakfast. So at this stage, I'll also open the floor for discussion. So if you have questions, please raise your hands, direct your question to the speaker as we continue this discussion anyway further. So another question that I have for the panel is that how are you getting a younger franchisee to come to your system? Because you're right when you said that, so gray-haired are probably, the businesses are becoming about young. Media only talks about the young startup. So if businesses is about the younger people want to start a business, why are we not inviting them into franchising? So are you, and in fact, Jason and Jimmy, this is for you as well, in your international markets, are you involving the young entrepreneur to join the franchise system? Are you giving him some sort of SOPs to come into the system to be a part of it?
Yes, we certainly are. The market out there today is a younger market, but they're a very different market to what we are currently used to. And one needs to know that you have to target them very differently. The younger person today has a different approach to life compared to what we had at his age. They have very strong social commitment. They have zero patience for advertising on their cell phones. They don't want to receive that. They need to engage with you. So it's a very different personality that you are dealing with, and you need to structure yourself in such a way that you appeal to that specific market. Also, one has to understand that at that age, they don't have access to finance as easily as an older person does. So what we have done is we have put into place a variety of financing packages, affordable financing packages, and packages which can work for a younger person. Yes, it does mean they have to work a lot harder in order to pay back their debts, etc. But they are prepared to do it if you give them the right tools.
Sure.
That's a very good question, actually. And when you think of the younger generation these days, they are so much more savvy from a social media and technology perspective, where they can really help add value to growing their business. But the challenge one of the challenges that I see is that, like they were speaking about earlier, the system needs to be supportive of encouraging entrepreneurial growth and franchising for the younger generation. In the U.S., with the systems like this, the SBA loans and bank financing and different ways that you can go out there and raise money for your business venture, it helps facilitate that process of getting into business for yourself. Absolutely, someone who's 23, 24 years old that just finished university, got their business degree or whatever, they have the passion, they have the fire to go and start a company, but they don't have the capital to get in there. So you need to have, it needs to be a balance. There needs to be a system that encourages the growth, that encourages entrepreneurship. And when you get that young person in there, they're going to work their butt off to make it happen.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, younger generation.
Murli, Nissan, you want to take it up?
Sure.
So one of the things, while we have been experienced youngsters versus the slightly more experienced people, we have a preference in our business specifically with more experienced people. We've struggled in the past with about youngsters coming in. And it's not about, probably it's a stereotype that we have developed for ourselves. It's more about the impatience that the youngsters sometimes bring in for the business. And it's about instantness about the results. And while there are some positive things, while I heard from Jason, there are good things that they bring into the table, but there are, from a sustainability perspective, as Gaurav said, it is important to get the right profile. And somewhere we believe that age does help us on our side if you have to grow this business on a sustainable basis. So if that answers.
Nissan?
I guess one of the things that comes with age is euphorism, that people are ecstatic about the future and they're very positive and upbeat. And when you work in the world of fashion, and whether it's footwear or apparel, the risks are pretty high, and you have to stay on top of your business. You have to be very, very conservative from the standpoint of not overly estimating what you think you can do, and taking quick corrective actions despite your gut. And we find that comes, I share the same thought with Murli, that it requires a little seasoning of being burnt by the fire a few times when it comes to products like fashion, and you know the next time you go into that fire, you're going to stay away from it or come up. You need a little bit of seasoning in certain industries where that youthfulness and that energy may actually be an inhibitor to good, sound business processes, whereas in other industries it's very good. Having said that, though, we as a country are the world's youngest population as a percent and in terms of number, so it's very important to be able to engage them at some level. Now, whether that's through a franchise operation or whether that's through your social marketing, that's a industry-specific answer.